know it's just the way it moves.
Yeah.
Because it rolls with the person. It's a very close martial art. You're not striking from a distance. You're kind of following people and you're rolling with people. So it kind of the way it moves is very good if you're doing massage.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Can I just add something or ask a question on this topic about the associations with Bhagwa Chang? When you've got, say, Qian is the lion, do you associate that with any particular palm change for a practitioner of Bhagwa Chang?
I wouldn't be. I only know a little about this. I know each animal has its own palm changes.
Yeah.
That would be like particular style to that particular animal. So there's eight of each palm change for each animal. Does that make sense? It comes into everything.
Yeah.
But there are different palm changes for each animal. Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. Thanks.
So if a palm change for a lion would be a lot more aggressive than the palm change you'd see for bear. There's a lot of distance in it. I don't know a lot about it. I've studied it for a little bit, but not a whole lot. I wouldn't be an expert or anything at all. Anyway, if you want to go to Dway Lake, we've got monkey. I think monkey is one of the last ones you learn. And then thunder, you've got a dragon system. And dragon would be one of the first ones you learn. And then we've got Shun Wind is Phoenix. And then water is Snake. And fire is Rooster.
Okay.
So just, this stuff can be applied to an awful lot of things. So that's just the way yin style Bagua looks at it.
So does anyone, can you explain a bit more about the phoenix being associated to Shun Wind?
The Phoenix Shun Wind, let's have a look. So it would have been the first one. It's considered gentle and penetrating.
Yeah, well that fits.
Tucks the tailbone, lifts the perineum, works with the shoulders. Let's see. So it seems to work a lot with connecting Ren and Dumai. So clinch the perineum, keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So force is emitted through a relaxed, elongated shoulder and waist. So it's kind of like a long whip.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Does that make sense?
The phoenix is often associated to the fire, the south of summer as well. So I was just wondering what that. I can see the gentle
I'll have a look at Rooster.
Relating to the wind. So apart from defending yourself or beating people up then, so how else can we, like if we maybe stick to a psychological perspective to keep a theme going, is there any way that we can incorporate this knowledge into a use of the trigrams, I guess, therapeutically? Anybody know that?
So if you want to look at the rooster one, So that rooster art, the main focus is on keeping the sternum relaxed. So that would be around the fire. So maybe that's where the fire part is coming out of rooster, is that it's working on the heart area, keeping the sternum relaxed. Maybe that's the angle they put on it.
Which would, in some ways, this yin line within the trigram, it gives that a hint of that relaxation. And obviously,
yeah, that looks nice. Yeah,
obviously because it's fire and Shen connection as well. So there's spirit.
also it's up first thing in the morning with the sun.
That's right.
Yeah, the sun. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's another thing I meant to say from our thing last week, where I was saying I'm not sure why the fire and the water is placed in the middle in Fuxi. There's a guy or someone put up on the on the YouTube channel that basically this is sun and moon, which is it was like, oh yeah, of course, it's sun and moon. So this is the you know, basically they're opposite each other, you could say, in the different quadrants as they go through the because they're in the, you've also got the green dragon association here, and the red bird in the north, the white tiger in the west, and the dark warrior, you could say, in the north. So there's also the correlation to those energetics of those heavenly attributes around what do they call this? Well, the heavenly animals, I guess.
Mm.
And then if we look again psychologically, this is the center. So here we got the balance equilibrium of heaven and earth represented through the center. And also representative of the sun rising and the reflective quality of the moon, and the dynamic of east to west. And how does that relate here? So we got the, I guess, the lion, the deer, dragon, and the lion. It's interesting that you've got for Kun Earth as well, that the lion energy, indicating the complementary characteristics of heaven and earth, and the potential of movement that we could say that can come out of yang and yin. So if we just put, what would be a characteristic of yang movement in a person? If we stick to the psyche again, it might make it a bit clearer.
I think the way they were talking about with lion and the unicorn was that the lion emits strength from the waist, but the unicorn receives strength from the waist. So they use the same element, but they use it in an opposite fashion.
We could say the waist then is the central aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you say that again, Keith? So the lion
emits strength from the waist. So the strikes would come from the waist, but the unicorn is a receiving energy. It's a yin energy. So it kind of neutralizes force using the waist. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. So I'll just screenshot that. Can we move on to anything else with that, Keith?
No, that's my tidbit for today.
Yeah. And Robert, you're obviously a martial artist by the sounds of it.
Hey, also, yeah, just thanks for doing this group, Paul, and g'day to everyone from Australia. Yeah, I've been sort of practicing Bhagwa Chang since 2006.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
So for better or for worse, I've had a difficult couple of years with a back injury, and so I've had to reduce it. But I've used Bagua walking to do a lot of healing in my hip, pelvis, and back. But yeah, I mean, there's no end of fascination to the unique kind of weirdness of Bhagwa Chang movement and martial arts. Is it's very twisted, very manipulative, and very soft and very powerful and very twisted, very, very coiled. So yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun, and it's very magical. You know, it's something that is, yeah, just to do Bagua stepping, just straight up, the most simple thing in Bhagwa Chang is just to walk, and to walk properly is such a very strange and powerful thing. It's pretty cool. And also there's you know, I see myself as a constant student of this stuff and Bhagwa Chang, and so yeah. But I did have a question, Paul, like about, I've had my mind blown about a few times in just the past 40 minutes. So thanks for that.
Good.
One thing, the first thing that I think is really, really, really cool. And I don't think there's any end to like the contemplation and the application of Fuxi and Qingwen sequences. But I never knew that the Qingwen sequences, trigrams, were read from outside in, and that has just popped something in my brain. And it's just remarkable. So yeah, I'd love if you could go through, because I think going through the basics is the most important thing for me, rather than I get sort of lost in the endless associations of things.
Yeah.
Because it becomes endless, like there's no end to it. And as an acupuncturist, I think it'll just take me time to like start applying I Ching sort of particularities to treatments. Yeah. But the basics is just, you know, how to derive the 5 element changes from Qingwen. I just haven't ever had that explained to me before, and that it was going outside in. So yeah, just I guess I've always tended to look for Fuxi sequence, because it just a bit more simple and sort of has a logic to it that's a bit more obvious. So yeah, if you could go through that Qingwen sort of construction again from the, just to say, if you recommended we get a piece of paper and draw it every day, and that's a really great advice. And yeah, I just think that's there's no end to being able to draw something from this sort of contemplation, from the going from the basics in that's what sort of I find really useful in this, as you keep referring back to the psychic aspect or the psychological aspect. So yeah, I appreciate that.
So where do we go from here then? So we got the picture up.
Yeah. So for starters, that they're being read outside in. That the bottom trigram, the bottom line of the trigram is the outside. Yeah. And then I'd love to know how you derive the 5 element, the 5 phases from the Qingwen sequence.
Well, there's if you like being a permanent student, and I'll put some links to, or I'll put it up on the Facebook group. Some of these you might not be able to see that too well, but there's a guy called Alfred Huang, and he's wrote a book, The Complete I Ching, and then he brought out this accompaniment to it, which is called the Numerology of the I Ching. Mm-hmm. And talking about blow your mind, well, it'll just blow your mind, the numerical connections that are found in the I Ching and the Bagua. It's quite phenomenal. So he describes in there that, again, the first element of creation was water, and water was heavy and was placed at the base, basically. So this is the first interaction here. And then recently I've been studying herbal medicine with the fire spirit school, and they've got an amazing, beautiful way of looking at the trigrams and the movement in the circle. And that's my edge of my mind thinking, you could say, which is what I'm really interested at the moment. So when I realised that the heaven trigram is actually in this position and actually gives its energy to the three yin lines of Kun Earth, which in the Fuxi is in the same position, we get an idea of the beginning of movement. What was that one that Keith said?
I like that, that the mother and the father then produced the first child of water. That was
no, that's a slightly different one. This is the elemental development. So water was first, and then fire came from water. So that you could say the energetic of water, the heat aspect, that created the volatilization of the liquid here to come up through the mists to form clouds, you could say. It's the water cycle as well. And it said that this the aspect of when the water comes up and creates clouds and then rains, the rain is actually yang infused yin. And it's the yang infused yin that we see in the tidal hexagrams, where the heart is at the top. I'll see if I can cut that. Maybe I can move through quicker something. Yeah, so this one here. So if you can imagine, the fire trigram is up in this position, as well as the heaven trigram is in this position in the three different ways of looking at this. The heaven aspect here is indicating that the pure yang is at its fulminant example of its characteristics in the midday sun. So that what that energy does for everything basically is the primordial yang in that aspect. And then when we get to the fire trigram, we see that actually what's come into the middle of that now is the yin aspect of Kun Earth as a pre-heaven stimulus, what to do when you've got everything. And so there's a level of release that occurs in this aspect, which is symbolized by this one yin line. So it's actually saying that even though we've got everything in the full yang, actually to take that further, now I have to release that. And not that it's a conscious release, you could say, but it's just a natural way of being that then allows decline or quiet or dark to come into place. And it's that receptivity of this side of the circle that is represented as the yin line and the fire trigram at the top in the king.
Can I just sort of comment on that? That I think I get that the line, the yin line at the base of that hexagram coming up the top is the same as the yin line being birthed in fire. And then that starts that yin process of like manifestation of embodiment that descends through the cycle.
Yeah.
Would that be?
Yeah, and they can't. We have in some ways we read them separately, but they're all part of the same energetic. So if we read the fire trigram as a characteristic of the spleen meridian, which is where it is. So in this aspect, the fire is representative of the spleen. So when we're looking at the spleen meridian and its association to the middle, because here we got the person head at the top, perineum, you could say, is the kun, the legs associated here. So this is again the center. So it's the yang, the attribute of earth and how it harmonizes and integrates all of the 8 trigrams as a representative of heaven and earth in their purest forms, are then put round into a north-south dynamic in King Wen's Gua, which is the north-south dynamic of nature. And when we look at the tidal aspect, this hexagram is Shun wind with heaven above. So I have to keep jumping between bloody pictures. So Shun wind is in this position, and this is also the position of Xiao Yang. So as the ministerial fire is climbing, the Jue Yin blood of liver pericardium is pulling this energy up, and the completeness, you could say, of the Xiao Yang level is actually bringing the energetic through to the Tai Yang. So there's a beautiful correspondence in the tidals in this representation, and this hexagram is called encountering, and it's actually the oppositional hexagram to return in the gallbladder. So there's a direct relationship between gallbladder and heart as well. So this yin line, in my understanding, is more representative of the nature of actually not holding the energetic of Qi, which is everything's. We'll look at that in a sec. I reckon we should go into qualities of yin and yang. But on a psychological perspective, often people that are very comfortable and their life is going according to plan have no need to challenge that at all. So if a life according to society's basis is that you got your health, you got a nice relationship, you got beautiful kids, you got a gorgeous house, you got a holiday home, you got all that, external kind of characteristics, then there's no need to move beyond that place, you could say. So what we find is that when the social program is tweaked a bit, when it's prodded and poked, when we don't have all of that accumulation of the yang energy, the abundance, then another aspect starts to wake up and starts to question. And again, this is down here, return. This is it's worth reading this hexagram, the 24th hexagram in the I Ching, and the 44th, and reading them as a correspondence. But this, you could say, is how we step into the world, how we use the movement from the base, from the feet, because Jin Thunder represents the feet, and how we bring that energy up through. And Shun wind also connects to the thighs. So we're bringing that power again within the legs, and how we step into the world, and then how we encounter it, how we meet it, you could say. So if we just, let's look at, let's get that back. And anyone, just jump in whenever you like. So from a psychological basis, then, what do you think the attributes of yin and yang would be?
In a psychological perspective, it would be the union of the opposites.
Beautiful.
You know, you asked the question earlier about why north and south, south and north, east and west, blah, blah, blah. But it's mirrored in, like, for example, our magnetic field. When you, if you see images of it, you see the opposites and how they blend together. And they need to function together because it forms part of a unifying, I don't know, defense system, defense mechanism. It's just an example of how we self-heal. And so we can't, it's very difficult to put words to describe flow of energy. I think it's really hard, but I think it's mirrored in nature all the time. This idea of the centrifugal force throwing things outwards is just normal. It couldn't be any other way in terms of understanding healing from the inside out, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I also, Mark, when it you describe it as the union of opposites, or have that this idea, it also brings to mind of like what the I Ching sort of and life teaches us, is that there's this,
that's right, yes,
this conflict of opposites, and that there's this disharmony that manifests in all different ways. Like, you know, some of the judgments of the lines in I Ching are just so difficult and scathing and out of context and full of sort of worry and confusion and conflict. So yeah, there's this as much as there's, it's almost like that's where we want to go, is to the union of opposites and the harmony.
absolutely. That's what we need to become whole. And what that means is that we have to acknowledge things like within ourselves individually, both masculine and feminine, good and bad, light and dark, a part of our own makeup that's mirrored around us all the time.
Yeah, and I just I suppose that's just the amazing thing about the I Ching. It teaches us what disharmony looks like.
Can I also suggest that in all of the healing arts, the energetic healing arts, they all say the same thing, just in a different language.
So as a general comment, I think one of the most amazing things about this system and this philosophy is that it's just not a dualism, that they're opposites, but they're not separate. It's a polarity, but it's not just
they're necessary.
Yeah, so that very basic premise is just so important and vital for, you know, what even is Chinese medicine and holism and stuff like this.
Well, I would see it a little bit, let's say, not different. Yin and yang, positive light and darkness. On the other hand side, we have a system, and this system, we have both energies. The energy of the light, the yang, and the energy of the yin. When everything is in balance, then everything is functioning perfectly. When one is too much, then the tendency of the system is to go back again in the neutrality, and then to experience this opposites, or this, when you have too much light, so suddenly is missing the darkness, is missing the other side wants to bring again the system into balance. And this is also something quite interesting, because as long as you stay in balance, you are in the neutral line. I will see it. From another perspective, I will see that the principle of light, or the Father, is the creator. It's our thoughts, what we have, and the Mother, the darkness, somehow put it on earth. She brings everything in this 3D, three-dimensional reality.
Yeah. I think that what's important to understand when we can acknowledge opposites, I'm going to use masculine and feminine as the best example, because, you know, for me to understand what is a woman, I need to have something in me that can relate to that. So to me, the opposites are there to help us become conscious of ourselves, which I think is what the meaning of these discussions are, in fact, is to bring about consciousness.
Yeah, I think that you were talking about the neutral aspect of this balance, and I think that pervades Taoist thought, is this sort of impartiality and the neutralness. Yeah, and the whole system is very impersonal. It's not sort of deified. It's about this fundamental, like, yin yang thing, which is, yeah. So neutrality, I think, is very, very potent. You know, it's the way that Shen operates, or the way that, or if you get too excited, there's too much fire, or if and you sort of lose that balance. And also that concept in the I Ching about constancy, or the mean, I think that speaks to that neutrality as well.
So just a question that came up for me is, what is wholeness?
Well, my answer is the union of the opposites.
Yeah, I bet it is. Yeah.
I think
That's a,
have this sense of it being about realizing the micro and macro innate reality to existence. We can only ever know from our point of view. We can't abstract the whole universe from our point of view. We can only ever have our point of view, and that realization of that your human system is complete universe in and of itself, just like all the other universes and the wholeness. So yeah, that really paradoxical, weird, bizarre, ineffable thing that the microcosm is like the macrocosm, and they reflect and are each other, and that's very strange and very, very weird and very difficult to think about, and to even use reason or reasonable thought or rationality. It doesn't really work. It's just innately like that. So yeah, I think that's somehow it's shocking to realize wholeness. I think it's absolutely shocking.
The dictionary definition says it's where the sum of the parts add up to more than sum of the parts, and I think it sort of we can explore it in the realms of vitality or energy rather than in substance or achievement. That it's a constant thing, wholeness. I guess the word integration would come into it. It's ability to fit into the whole cosmos, not just into the needs of society. So from that, I agree, it's a very difficult thing to live all the time. But I like the idea of striving towards wholeness, because that to me is what makes us conscious. And it allows us to acknowledge that we're bigger, there's something bigger. Sorry, hello?
Well, let's say my perspective, I will say that wholeness is where all these 5 elements are in perfect harmony. because if you have too much a little bit, then the system is a little bit not balanced. But we have the enough proportion of every element, then you will define as wholeness. You have, this is, I would say, wholeness.
Yeah.
So we're all saying the same thing in very different language, aren't we?
Yeah, I think there's also an element of time in this. It's like an internal balance with the external environment, but all of that is changing all the time, and it's being able to keep sync with that through time is what I'd see it as.
That's a really good point, and then also speaks to that 5-phase thing, that the 5 elements are not substantial elements necessarily, but they're phases. They're kind of
Exactly, yeah.
and that creates time and space, and yeah.
So you've got 2 or 3 moving things, or more moving things, moving through time at the same time. So you can see why you need a complicated book like the I Ching to help you guide your way through it.
So time is, I would say, is more post Helen King Wen's Bagua.
Yeah.
And it brings in past and future. So
In this later, sorry, Paul, in this later arrangement, what you have drawn here, indeed, time is linear. You know, it's going clockwise, and you have all this sequence of spring, summer, fall, and winter.
yeah,
But on the other diagram of primary arrangement, I will say there the time is irrelevant. It's like in quantum physics, where time doesn't really exist, where everything is the same. Time, present, past, and future is the same point. Doesn't really matter.
Well, you can also argue that in the human condition, that's what we're striving for towards wholeness, is to be present and not living in the past or imagining the future.
That's true.
yeah.
That's true.
So how do we do that when we got people coming for us for assistance?
Great question.
I think one of the things I find the hardest is that people have knowledge, academia, so they come with a preconceived idea about what needs to happen, and it's how people can take on board a different concept, a different way of seeing themselves. But I also think that once they do that, it's transformative. It's like people come to fix a part and not the whole, and it's how you get them to see that part as part of a whole and the correspondences between the two. And we can do that through energetic medicine without actually having to explain to them, but consciousness takes information.
I think that's a really important consideration, right? Is that what's the point of trying to assist someone by loading them up with concepts or we live in Western cultures largely, I'm assuming, in this meeting, and so it's very rare that people explore this ancient Chinese system of reality. So it would seem really impractical and potentially just useless to, talk in exotic concepts and sort of almost alienate a patient or a client or whatever it is, whoever it is. So then the art, and I think this borrows from some of the Buddhist methodology of that skillful means concept, the upaya of skillful means, of like how to transmit something useful that's not too abstract and cerebral. And I think that's the art of being a healer and being a therapist, is to talk to people in their language. And I think that can be really tricky, but I think sometimes it's really simple, and whatever it is. And I think that also speaks to the question you were saying, Paul, about the comment about being present, and to be whole is to be, present. And therefore, by being present, you get to tap into being whole. And you can only be a good therapist or healer if you're present with a person. So I think this seems to be a dynamic interplay of you know, awareness in that very moment. And I think yeah, it's.
But with that also brings up the because we got a funny, like Mark talked last week about the ego, and so when you're talking about to be present, I can feel the ego going, oh yeah, I've got to be present. I've got to focus on being present. So, and if I'm not present, that means I'm something opposite. So again, we have this a movement of energetic, you could say, away from the present space. So I think in a lot of ways we could maybe call it preference in regard to presence. So when we have
yep. Who was it that talked about time? Was it Keith?
Yeah,
I think time is important because the concept of the misconception about medicine is that there's a cure, there's something that makes you better, and that by accepting that change takes time and it takes practice and it takes a conscious effort to do it rather than externalizing it onto something else. So then Robert is saying effectively that it's about the energy between you and the person. There's a kind of bond, a relationship, a psychological thing that goes on at the same time as applying techniques or ideas that people that have to like you, they want to be with you and work with you, that sort of thing.
I would add to that as soon as we add the concept of it takes time, we're already in the past, present, past, future track. Because there is nowhere to move, and the concept of sequential learning, for example, without that we wouldn't have anything that we've got in our world now. So that's from a growing perspective. We have to sequentially learn. From a psychological perspective, I think the illusion of time is psychological imbalance. And that's based on the principle that we prefer to be something different than what's actually what we are. And that's the movement through the 8 directions of the Bagua, I think. And then when people come, they show different characteristics from those different quadrants of what it is, particularly then they're trying to move away from or trying to prevent actually feeling, you could say, or seeing. And I think that's yeah.
It's just so strange and difficult to sort of talk about, but like whether time is an illusion or whether it's not necessarily that time is an illusion, but we have attachments to identity in past and present and future, or past and future. And the 5 phases, you know, talks essentially to, in my view at the moment, it talks essentially to emptiness. There's an emptiness in and that the 5 phases are expressing a dance, and it's not substantial, it's not linear, but it contains and what you were saying, Mark, before about it's not that someone needs a pill or there's a remedy for their cure, but the fact that they can spend time and effort in their healing, and sequentially in that, you know, it produces a healing response over time. That also is, you know, that's so powerful to empower someone to put effort and time into their own body, rather than the paradigm of allopathic medicine being that you take a pill and it fixes the problem. They don't have to put effort or think about time like this, when healing can be a path that someone walks and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, a few things come out of that just make me think, and this is why it's cool to have this Zoom meeting. So yeah.
another perspective which I will see concerning the healing. Most of the time, the patients which they are coming is they are stuck somehow an event from the past, and this event from the past created so much imbalance in their body, and so much imbalance or lack of one element that at the end brought them in a position where cannot move forward. So they are stuck there in the past, and they need help. And then they are going to a doctor, to a traditional doctor, give me the magic pill, where I will take this pill, but I'll still do the same habits on a daily basis, and with this magic pill, everything will be healed. And for us, I would say the healer is if we bring them another perspective, say this pill is not actually what you need. You need a little bit of time to drop that memory from the past and bring you in the present moment right now, not in the past, right now. And then starting from now, start to rebuild your life and balancing you this element which you are missing, that I think is the starting point where the patient realize that he needs to work first a lot on himself, and not us, not so much where we bring him the other perspective, but not necessarily we give him the tools and he has to do the big lifting at the end. He has to walk his path, and there the time, he needs time for this, and it's hard to for many people in this society to understand that everything needs a little bit of time to heal. It's not like right away, because the society in the past 200-300 years taught us this. We want something right now, if it's possible. Not they drop this they drop this idea of for everything you need time.
Amazing, isn't it? It's such a powerful, potent spell of the culture we live in modern culture, that everyone's so expecting of immediacy and gratification. So I think as healers and therapists, it's something that we can really bring to the world, is that to slow things down and stuff like that.
The archetypal healer, for example, Jesus Christ, he did most of his walking. He didn't do it sitting still. He walked with people, and that's how healing took place. I'm not trying to promote Jesus Christ as blah, blah, blah. I'm just trying to say that healing happens over time. You go on a journey, you lead people to places that allow them to explore themselves, if that makes sense. So the most important thing is, as a healer or a therapist, is our relationship with them and how they conceive of that relationship in comparison to all of their relationships. Healing's not done sat in a chair.
Well, I kind of feel that time's a bit of a problem for psychological balance, and I'm not quite sure how to bring that back into trigrams. Because,
Paul, you need time to make change. You can't just affect change like in a chemical way. It's like Robert's saying, and Ovidiu, that your mind has to adapt to the changes. It has to understand what it's doing and why it's doing it. But ultimately, these changes become habits, that it's just changing from one way of being to another way of being. And it has to happen over time, not only individually, but culturally. It takes generations to affect change. There has to be a starting point, but the end point happens a lot later. That is what the existence of our world is. So part of consciousness must involve time. It may not be relevant to the rest of life because we come back to the same place each time. You know, we come back to the beginning of spring year after year after year, but it will never be the same spring as the previous one.
I'd like to add onto that that the concept of time, Paul, is, I don't think there's one view of it, because I think there's the view that in an ultimate sense, in ultimate reality, that time doesn't exist, that everything is existing in one giant moment, that all the past and future is contained. And then there's, and I think that might be expressed better in Fushi's sequence, that creation, that's the creation process, and there is no necessarily past and future in that. There is just this creation process. But then the King Wen sequence, sort of time gets produced as 5 phases, and change sort of becomes manifest in the external, and then we participate in that dance. And I think there's this there's the phenomenological time that we experience, that we can easily get hooked into the illusion of past and experience past and future. And then there's sort of ultimate time. And I kind of seem to, in a practical way, draw a distinction between those two, because yeah, I think it's true that ultimately the past and future don't exist. But then I think it's also true that, hold on, I really did come from back there, and I'm here, and I'm moving toward here, and there's no way that I can't, yeah, that I couldn't have done everything happened before, you know. So yeah, it's
So what is past and what is past and what is future?
I think it's a concept. It's like everything in life is a concept. So it's just a structure that people use to organize themselves. And of course, we can say that time, the past and the future don't really exist. But in human terms and in terms of healing, Vidya's right. We often get stuck in events from the past that we can't, that change our behavior, that obstructs our movement forward. Let's call it evolvement or evolution or whatever you want to say, because there is a motion. Time has to go with motion. Time can't stand still.
Yeah, time.
And I think
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
So then we're into the realms of energetic qualities again, that you need some, I don't know how else to describe it other than time, but space for movement to change. And that's going on all the time. So we are really, to become whole, just getting back in the motion of everything else. And that will be the movement forward.
And almost paradoxically, or in a tricky sense, all of that change is happening in the kind of singular now. And that singular now is the now moment that always escapes us, yet is always being created, is very mysterious. I think that's where the mystery is in the eternal now. And so that past feeling that someone might be hooked into that affects them, and they carry this past with them to the future, as Ovidio, you were saying, and they're suffering because of this event or trauma or something in the past. Well, that event or trauma that happened in the past is being continually reproduced in that person as an attachment in the now, which is, so almost in this way, then it comes back to the time becomes an illusion, or is ultimately an illusion, because this now is continually erupting. So yeah, that's when I think it becomes, there's no other way to deal with this shit other than contemplate. You know, you need to contemplate in the now in order to at all ever grasp or even make contact with the now. There's no way around that. You can't think yourself through this stuff. You know, it has to be experienced.
The only way you get the hamster wheel to stop is if you put your finger on it. That's right. You have to do it on purpose.
I'll shoot the hamster.
Yes, yes. So the concept about time, can we associate it with the brain and the right moment with the heart?
Say more.
Say that again.
Time, concept of time that will associate with the brain and the concept of right now with the heart.
Yeah, okay. Say more, Mark said.
So interesting, the heart is constantly real-time beating according to...
Well, it's beating, isn't it? The heart, tick, tick, tick. Yeah.
So it's right now. It is in the present moment, because if the heart will not beat, then suddenly the system will die, the body will die in 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes.
So obviously in the Chinese, the heart-brain is a unit, it's a connection. So how can they, in regard to psychological balance, how can brain-heart interact with time?
Well, most of our traumas or our bad experiences they are saved in our brain as a time stamp. There is a frame. Somehow, when the brain, when we are depressed and where this old record is played again and again and again, then the heart is basically appears an imbalance. The heart is a little bit lower and the brain is a little bit higher, and it is leading the brain. But when we are in the right now, in this moment, we say yesterday it was a wonderful day, the way how it was doesn't really matter what happened, or you just let go, then you have the perfect balance, brain and the heart, and you are right now. On the other hand side, I'm thinking that everything what was in the past, you just drop it, you let it go. It's not important. You already worked on that issue. Well, a lot to say issue.
I would come back with that
like
with and just say that that's letting go is a movement. So again, we come back to movement as time, as a time concept. So what if there was nothing to let go of?
Then you are in the present moment. Then you are in balance. Then you are enjoying the present moment right now, what is happening right now, the fact that the sun is shining right now, the fact that there's a dog on the street or a butterfly, or you're enjoying the smell of a flower. You are enjoying the partner, your wife, your children. You're enjoying, and everything is in balance. You are not thinking in tomorrow, because tomorrow doesn't really exist. You create it right now with your heart, with the energy of your heart.
Which sounds, again, this is the history of our religious and spiritual cultures, is that they give, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it, to enjoy the flowers and the sunshine and your partner and all that sort of stuff. So it gives us, again, another preference, something to move towards again. So
the way I look at it is from, if you take the Bagua diagram, the yin and the yang fish, that people sit somewhere within that diagram. So if you sit out near the edge, the diagram is moving and the yin and yang are changing, and you get these big tidal movements coming around, and that's when life is really chaotic. And then what we're talking about now is being in the moment, is when we manage to sit within the middle, right at the center point. So at the center point, those tidal movements are minimalized. They're really small, so that we're not living with these big yin and yangs and ups and downs and hot and cold, but we're sitting at a content point at the center. And then, because this is not just a one-dimensional movement, this is something that's moving through time and through the environment, that the whole concept of being content and sitting at the center as we move through the universe in time. So there's a lot of different factors acting on it. But if we can do this and we quieten our mind and live in the moment, that we can find that contentment, and it's been able to hold on to that contentment.
Of course we can, yeah. In
Yeah,
fact,
but the trick is holding on to it, because we can all experience it from time to time. But the trick is being able to hold on to it as it moves through other things and moves through space and time.
you see, it's interesting you say that, Keith, because there's an argument to say that you can't have it all the time, because otherwise you don't have consciousness. You need the element of striving to keep you conscious. We can't just live in paradise all the time, because life has opposites that they're there to challenge us. But you know
what if you've got through the challenges already, Mark?
Well, you can do. No, I agree you can do that. But I think to live it all the time, everybody has to do the same thing. If you're there yourself, you're quite alone, as we are in this phase of consciousness, which I think is very early and primitive. And also, we have to expand it, not just the heart, but, you know, it's a known thing that the stomach is part of the brain. And a lot of what we think in relation to past events is because there's activity going on inside us that tells our brain this. That's why our brain thinks in the past. If we still those activities, then we still the brain, and our mind can then be living in the moment. But to have an environment and a time where you can not be overwhelmed or impinged on in some way is very, very hard. Very hard.
Oh, very hard. Yes, absolutely.
But
I agree. Yes, we do need to bring the whole body with us. You can't just bring one thing in and leave the rest of it behind.
Yeah.
One of the fundamental sort of operations or operatives and of the Tao and also Yi Jing is that the ways, and speaking to what you were saying, Mark, the way is open, the way is closed. The way opens to us and the way closes itself to us. And I'm very averse to the type of thinking that is sort of idealizes a bliss state that is perfect and everything's harmonious and that exists, and that's a sort of something to even strive for, because I don't think that's real, and I don't think that's the thing to strive for. Yet there is harmony and there is balance. And as soon as if you have an idealized version of that state and you're striving for that, then already, as what Paul was saying before, you've created a preference. And already there's something that you want and something that you don't want. So I'm just, that fundamental premise that is in the Tachuan and the great treatise of that the way is open, the way is shut, and how do who are you and how do you navigate that? Because it's not all roses and flowers and pretty smells. It's actually really, really difficult, dark.
Well, we have to go through winter as well as summer.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's nice to meet you all.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, good chat today. Yeah.
I'm going to be a bit of a bore, but I have to go early today. I've got something on.
No problem, Mark. Well, we're coming to a close anyway, so we can.
I've really enjoyed it. It's really nice. It's really nice to meet you, and you, Keith, and all that, and Judy. Is Judy still there?
No, she was a bit knackered. She's been working in the garden all day, so she said she's left a message and headed to
give her my love.
The rest. And we're going to meet in a month in March, not weekly.
The second Sunday of the month, yeah?
Yeah, cool. All right.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, look forward to it, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
See you, Mark.
Please don't go because I am. I just thought I'm going to say goodbye and I'll see you in a month. But
yeah, no worries.
Thank you very much indeed. It was really good.
Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to the speech and the language that, when we look at striving or time and things like that, it's so entrenched into our language movement. And that was just one thing I was thinking with the Fushigwa, is that we got heaven and earth as the two pre-heaven or the two primordial components, and then the first thing they create is Jun Thunder, which represents the feet, but it's also the dynamic, rapid, impulsive movement, you could say, of spring energy.
And also, Paul,
yeah,
Gen Thunder, the birth of Gen Thunder is, to me, and how I've understood it, is the birth of Shen through the human system. And also Kundalini being birthed at the base of the spine. And that, like, as they say, the true energy is born again. So the birth of consciousness and existence in form as a meditative process as well is Gen the Thunder, is that you participate in the process of creation, and then Gen Thunder is a part of the energetic rite of realization.
Absolutely.
As the Shen is being born, or emerging or re-emerging.
And when we consider that the eldest son is the first to be manifested, and then the second coupling of heaven and earth create the eldest daughter. So the wood trigrams, you could say, in that sequence of movement, are the first two to be manifested. And the quality of wood is the ability to move in any direction. So there's all these nice little tidbits, you could say, within the hexagram, within the Bagwas, the pivot of the Chinese thinking in regard to creation, and then the way that humanity can follow that aspect. So it's it's an interesting concept that changes. Well, it's the book of changes, the I Ching. So it's obviously recognizable that everything changes, but there's a simplicity within it as well that in some ways, well, not in some ways, but can never be attained through striving. And if you're anything like me, the idea that you can't do anything or strive for anything to create what it is you want, because you can't actually want anything, because wanting something moves you away from that center again. It does that mind-blowing stuff, And then if you look at...
And also...
Sorry, yeah. Just one last thing. Right. That's my understanding of the Gun Mountain being placed here in the King Wensgua, is this movement of ministerial fire up into the spring, first of all, goes through the standing still attribute of the mountain. So there's a real composure here. And this, in the tidal hexagrams, is the liver in earth aspect as well. So there's a connection to Jun Thunder and wood as well. Yeah, things to muse on. Anyway, so we got 3 minutes. Any final directions?
I think what you were just saying, Paul, about having preference or no preference, then is that concept of non-being, to achieve things, to achieve what someone wants. They can't do it through action, but through non-action you can achieve the whole world. I think.
Well, that's another dilemma, because actually action is the only movement. So this is, the difference between sequential learning and psychological learning. Psychological learning is a psychological imbalance, because even the idea of non-action, although it's the Wu Wei and it's all within the knowledge, and that for me, when you come underneath that, it's actually action is spontaneous without preference. It's just completely spontaneous on the environment and the movement that's presented in the space.
No doubt about it. It's very weird.
Very good. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to wind it up then, guys.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks,
So
guys.
Thank you very
Nice to
much,
meet you all.
Paul.
if I think most of you are in the you signed up on the email yet? Because I send out the recording via the email. Anyway, if any of you don't get the recording, just drop me an email or a messenger, and I'll get that sorted.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys. It's
Amazing.
really lovely.
I love that
See you
name,
tomorrow.
Smiling Penance. Were you brought up?
Oh yeah.
Were you brought up Catholic?
Well, at least you got it.
Yeah, cool. I was a Catholic boy. Yeah.
That's a game handle I've been using for a couple of years.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
100 Hail Marys and small.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't really care.
All right, fellas. Well,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you in a month. Good
Thanks,
luck.
Paul.
Awesome.
See you
Bye.
in 1 month. Bye.
Okay.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.